Yay, Ned Fulmer came back. Said no one ever. By now you may or may not have heard the news. Ned's back. No one asked for this, by the way. It's just another unfortunate reality we have to face this year. Add it to the frickin' list. Today we're gonna talk about cheating. It's a doozy of a subject. There are layers. Each individual circumstance is slightly different. It's an objectively horrible thing to do to another person, and yet it happens all the time. So my question is always, why? If you would so choose, please join me in partaking in one of my favorite hobbies, reading cheaters to filth. The cheater in question today is Ned Fulmer. He was one of the 4 Try Guys. I was pretty exclusively a Dan and Phil girly. I never even thought to venture beyond them. So I don't really know that much about the Try Guys at all. What I do know is that the Try Guys are one of the staples of YouTube. Originally, it was Ned, Keith, Zach, and Eugene. They started at BuzzFeed and then left to form their own production company. Basically 3 years ago, back in 2022, if you need a little refresher or are just straight up out of the loop, here's how it went down. Pictures started floating around of Ned and this girl at a Harry Styles concert and at bars in New York, and they were hanging out, kissing, so basically they were out in public and got caught in the act of cheating on several occasions. Ned, as you know, is a well-known figure on the internet, so fans spotted him and were taking these pics. As the next few weeks went by, Ned started to disappear from Try Guys related content, eventually culminating in the announcement that Ned had been fired from the Try Guys. Ned wasn't fired because he cheated, but rather it was because of the nature of his workplace romance. Here are the crucial details to keep in mind. By this point, Ned had been with his wife Ariel for about 10 years and they had 2 kids together. The woman that Ned was having the affair with, aka Alex, was a production manager and employee of Ned and was engaged. Ariel was also a bit of a public figure and had been working with the Try Guys up until this point, and Ned's online persona was the family man who loves his wife, which made the whole thing all the more sick and twisted. After this, Ned and Ariel pretty much disappeared from the internet until Ned dropped a podcast episode featuring Ariel on September 17th of this year, which is a week ago from when I'm posting this video, and that's what has everybody talking about the situation again. So it's important to note, Ned's brilliant business move to re-enter the good graces of the internet was always going to be to make this podcast. It's called Rock Bottom with Ned Fulmer, and the shtick is that he's going to be interviewing people who've been through some tough times, and he's the perfect person to host this because he's a well-known piece of shit who publicly hit rock bottom himself. Amazing, but here's the thing, Ned, your channel didn't even start at rock bottom. You rebranded one of your other channels by slapping your stupid face on it. He had a parenting podcast with Ariel called Baby Steps, which already had 62,000 subscribers, which has now become Rock Bottom with Ned Fulmer. The fact that this so closely mirrors what he did to his marriage, you know, I'm truly at a loss for words. Another thing that's important to note is it was actually Ariel's idea for her to come on and broadcast this conversation with him. She wanted to get this all out in the open so that the two of them can move on with their lives, you know, on the internet, since they already moved on privately in their personal lives. So this is just catching the fans up to speed, so to speak. And she probably also thought that we should see his tomfoolery for ourselves. And boy, have we. My God. The situation makes me angry and is always going to make me angry because cheating's a tale as old as time. It's happened in the relationship of our favorite celebrity couples a couple times in the recent past, has resulted in huge scandals, and it's all over our favorite media. And that's why The Summer I Turned Pretty Season 3 was so annoying. Side tangent, because I always knew what was going to go down with Jeremiah in season 3, and but that's fiction, obviously totally different. We're talking about reality. There's some leniency when it comes to fiction, but you cannot play when real people are being affected, when there are real lives at stake, real feelings. If you aren't actively in a relationship and you want to fantasize about cheating, go nuts. That cannot be me though. Personally, when I'm entering my mind palace and thinking about what hypothetical scenario I'm gonna throw myself into tonight, why would I want to fantasize about hurting someone? How about a good friends to lovers? Enemies to lovers, forced proximity. I'm a sucker for the forced proximity trope. That sort of relationship dynamic is so fun to explore, and I especially love seeing it play out on the big screen. With the sponsor of today's video, Love in Deepspace, you get to experience exciting love stories like the ones from the movies in this 3D dating simulator where you have not 1, not 2, but 5 different love interests competing for your affection. As you're navigating the emotional roller coaster of falling in love with these men, you're also helping them fight to protect humanity in this fantasy sci-fi universe. You get the best of both worlds, cinematic level animation and delicately nuanced emotional storytelling combined with an immersive first-person point of view. One of my favorite films is La La Land, and if you also love the scene where Seb and Mia finally share a sweet kiss after looking longingly into each other's eyes in the observatory, you literally get to experience that firsthand with these characters. Like I mentioned, there are 5 different guys to choose from, but let me focus on one, my boy Zayne. You know him now as the smart and stoic doctor, but as we relive memories from another life, we get to see him with a whole new look as this super hot god of annihilation. Once you step into this world of sand and stone, you can't help but wonder what caused this emotional emotional distance between you and Zayne, and what secrets is he hiding? The vibes actually remind me of the movie 50 Shades of Grey, because in the movie, the main characters Christian and Anastasia have conflicting ideologies, oscillating between love and hate, with passionate yet conflicted moments during their sexual scenes. Similarly, in the game, the relationship between you and Zayne is just as thrilling, making it impossible to resist. Love and Deepspace provides you with the best virtual romance experience possible, so if the story intrigues you or if any of the guys caught your eye, use my link to download the game now. Thank you so much to Love and Deepspace for sponsoring this video. Now, let's get back to it. So basically, the main gist of the podcast is that Ned comes out and straight up says, 3 years ago, I cheated on my wife with my producer. I want to apologize, and me and Ariel, we've both been hiding from the public because of that scandal, but we want to clear the air and set the record straight. And Ariel says that they're not together, you know, they're not dating, they're not, I don't know if they're technically married or not, but they live separately and they're still devoted co-parents. But at the end of the day, she doesn't forgive him. Fuck no, absolutely not. She does not forgive him for what he did, which, yes. So that's the context of how we're starting this podcast. This is where we're meeting them emotionally. It was 3 years since all of that shit went down, and, you know, they're still friendly with each other. They're still co-parents, but you know, there's a lot of tension because obviously she doesn't forgive him, and I don't blame her in the slightest for that. So with all of that being said, let's psychoanalyze and debrief. I'm low-key assuming that y'all are already somewhat aware of the situation. I'm going to be talking about specific quotes that were said in the interview that really pissed me off or devastated me. First of all, in Ned's case, you cannot justify his cheating as a mistake. There were many instances where he needed to make a decision, where he chose to take a specific action. There was a repeated pattern of behavior for many months. So no, you cannot simply reduce this to a singular mistake. Cheating is a conscious, intentional betrayal of your partner. In Ned's case, it was a continuous intentional betrayal. You know what I mean? Like, you can't just be like, oh, damn, I made a mistake. You made you made tens, hundreds of mistakes every single day for months. And in my eyes, when it comes to cheating, it's impossible to defend. There is literally nothing that you can say to make me gain even an ounce of sympathy for you. I like, really, truly, it's one of those things where it's a completely unnecessary move to make. It devastates your family, your partner, and you chose to do it anyway. Like, at the end of the day, those are just the facts. You chose to do something that you knew would hurt someone, and I'm not going to feel bad for you as a result. By cheating, Ned chose to throw away his 10 years of marriage. He chose to jeopardize his family and the relationship he has with his kids. He chose to sully his public image. He chose to betray and traumatize the so-called love of his life. He chose to lie about who he is to his family, his fans, his friends. Not only that, the woman that he was having an affair with, she was engaged, like I mentioned, and she worked for him. Because Ned is a founder and co-owner of the Try Guys, it would have been difficult for her to make an HR complaint if she felt uncomfortable. The imbalance of power between the head of a company and his subordinate, and their failure to report the relationship at all because obviously it was an affair, like it was, you know, secret until it wasn't. That was what resulted in Ned being fired from the company. Ned's decision not only harmed the reputation of the company, but hurt all of the employees as a result. Like, he didn't just put his own family in jeopardy, it was the lives of literally everybody working with him and for him. And he chose to cheat publicly. Bro, either be a bad husband or a bad cheater, not both, you fucking loser. The entirety of the podcast was Ariel eloquently describing her thoughts and emotions surrounding the affair with Ned, failing to empathize every step of the way. For example, Ariel described finding comfort in her newfound friendships, where she gained the sense of community and support and felt that they accepted her for who she is, even though her name was being thrown around in the media, like her personal life was very messy at the time. And Ned was like, yes, OMG, me too. Like, when I talk to other married couples, I realized that every relationship has their struggles and tough times, and you know, that made me feel a lot better. My guy, you are the struggle and the tough times. She also shared how as a society there is a responsibility and burden placed on the woman a lot of the time, even though they are the one being cheated on, because they tell the wife that she did something wrong or wasn't good enough, which led the husband to cheat. And Ned was like, fuck, God, I hate society. How could they do this to you? Ned, society is reacting poorly to something that you did. It's your fault she has to undergo any of this in the first place. Also, when Ned would say some stupid shit, Ariel would just let the words hang in the air, which was super satisfying. The thing that irks me, the thing that really grinds my gears, is that Ned, buddy, you can't take accountability for something that you're low-key in denial about. So Ariel was describing how she found out about the affair, and she was like, I had to find out from fans. I was blindsided. You shattered our marriage and then hoisted all of that guilt and shame onto me. And you know what his response was? I didn't realize all that was going to happen until you found out. And Ariel was like, you didn't realize until then that doing this would hurt me? And he was like, well, I never imagined all this. If you really let it sink in how much you're hurting your partner and how devastating it is, how could you do that, you know? Ned, you have a degree in chemistry from Yale, and you are looking into Ariel's eyes and telling her to her face that you didn't realize that actions have consequences until the ripe age of 35 years old? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. It's no wonder Ariel doesn't forgive him for what she did. I mean, granted, even if somebody took total and full accountability and realized their mistakes, even then, I still wouldn't blame her for not forgiving him. But then we have Ned, who is saying technically all of the right things that he's supposed to, except for in the instances, in the more subtle ways where it just shows that he doesn't fully comprehend. He just doesn't understand, and he's always going to see himself as part of the victim of this situation, even though he is the one totally and completely to blame and in the wrong. Like, you can tell by the way that he's speaking about things that he does feel like he was a victim in this to an extent, because of whatever scandal that resulted from his affair. But to me, it just does not seem like he understands fully the level and extent of betrayal that he did. So Ariel found out, she confronted him. He didn't even have the decency to tell her himself. Obviously he was caught by the fans, and then when she brought it up to him, his facial expression gave away his guilt. And then he said that at first he felt relieved that he didn't have to lie to her anymore. It was an addictive cycle, but man, thank God that part's over, right? And I'm assuming that he thought the worst had passed, I guess, the second that she found out, because he said his rock bottom was that night, later on in that day, after, they went their separate ways, him and Ariel. She texted him saying that they won't be able to get past this, and their marriage was over essentially. And that is the moment that he said where he hit rock bottom. So let me get this straight, Ned. Your rock bottom was getting caught and having to endure the consequences and realize that your wife was not going to just forgive you instantly. It wasn't the cheating, the lying, the hurt that you caused everybody in your life. No, it was when you felt bad for yourself because you realized that she wasn't going to let this slide. Obviously, as you can already tell, the podcast was a really devastating watch on so many levels, but I think one of the quotes that really stuck out to me was when Ariel was like, I thought we had this love that transcended everything, but it was a fantasy. I trusted you so completely. We grew up together. How could you do this to me? We had so much life left. And if you think that Ariel's being dramatic right now, she really is not. Having someone in your life that you trust so completely betray you like this is a deeply life-altering event. To put it this way, Ariel didn't say this also, by the way, I'm making an inference here, but in her mind, the person that she grew up with, fell in love with, married, and had kids with would never cheat on her. But he did. So then it's like the rug gets pulled out from under you because this person who you thought you knew better than anybody else in the world, the person who you thought knew you better than anybody else in the world, is now a stranger because they were able to cross a boundary and break your trust and hurt you in an unimaginable way. It takes a specific type of person to be able to make the decision to do that. You know what I'm saying? And if you thought that they were never capable of that, and turns out they are, that completely changes your perception of them. For her, in a single moment, the future that she had dreamt about was taken away, ripped away from her, and the memories of her past become forever tainted. And all of that came crashing down on her in a single moment. Whereas Ned, the first time making the decision to cheat, obviously that's where you fuck up and there's no turning back. But then he had the opportunity to grapple with all of his emotions that he was feeling, him causing his own destruction and digging his hole even deeper. He had months and months to process this. But when Ariel found out, she was mourning probably everything all at once. It's so much to handle. And you know what Ned's response to this was? He was like, Yeah, I get it. I know. The dream of our future died for me too. You killed the dream, Ned! You first degree murdered that bitch and you have the audacity to mourn it? Although what he probably meant by that was that for him the dream died earlier, and that's probably part of the reason why he decided to cheat. But regardless, again, zero sympathy for me. Like, there are so many other ways to cope with that sort of feeling. Maybe, hey, communicating. Maybe, hey, go to therapy. Those are two really good options right there. And then Ned was all like, there's nothing I can do to change the past or help. But, you know, it just hurts to see you hurt. And he was acting like he had no idea she would feel hurt by this until she found out and he could see the hurt right in front of his face. That's crazy to me. This was a completely preventable outcome. Like I mentioned, he could have chose to navigate this in way healthier ways. Therapy, communication, whatever the case may be. Treating is not even an option. It's just not. And you chose to do it anyway. I was curious before watching this interview how Ned was going to talk about his affair. You know, when it comes to people who cheat, like I said, because it's unforgivable to me and because there's literally no excuse or justification, I feel like it ultimately doesn't even really matter what they say. But, you know, also, it is interesting to like see the logic, see the thought process behind it. And I expected him to pander by being like, you know, it's all my fault, I'm the worst. And he did do that, but I didn't believe him. And matter of fact, I haven't seen a single person who has. And it's because of the more subtle ways in which he reveals his true colors. And it was like the content and the verbiage of what he was saying, not how he said it. Which, side note, his voice was so annoying this podcast. I haven't seen a video of him like really at all, so I don't know if this is just what he sounds like, but man, a podcast is not an ideal medium for a voice like that. Goodness gracious. So like I was just saying, he revealed his true colors in more subtler ways, like through his verbiage. I don't think he even said the words "my affair" ever. He would refer to it as the scandal, which very telling. The scandal, so you're referring to the public backlash of it all and not the your actions caused this of it all. And he seems to harbor hopes of him and Ariel getting to a better place or of her completely forgiving him, which is incredibly unreasonable if he fully understood the extent of his harm. Do you know what I mean? Like, I feel like if you truly got it, you would not even expect or want this of your ex-partner. There seems to be a bit of cognitive dissonance going on there, because even when she straight up asked him why he cheated, why he would do this to her, his responses were so weak and non-specific. You know, whether it be like, oh, I was, you know, they're justifications, you tell yourself, you compartmentalize, you know, I was insecure, I was scared, blah, blah, blah. Which again, it did not give me any sort of confidence that he broke any ground over these past 3 years with his reflection and therapy. And you know, I feel like that's usually the case with people like him, though. A confrontation is never satisfying because they aren't even admitting to themselves about the true horrors of what they've done, let alone to the person that they've hurt. For whatever reason, they still think of themselves as a good person who made a mistake, as opposed to someone capable of harming another person in a deeply unforgivable way. Ned was then all like, I guess I was too afraid to say how I was actually feeling. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make amends to you. And he was like, I'll do anything, please let me make it up to you. Again, not cheating was an option. It always has been, and it's such an easy choice to make because not cheating requires inaction. Like, it doesn't require you to live your life in any different way. Cheating actually involves a lot of time and resources that you could have spent on literally anything else. Anything at all. And you can't sit here and be like, man, I'm so down on my luck. Who could have foreseen all that was going to unfold? Why do people who cheat assume that no negative consequences will befall them? That's quite literally the only outcome. It's only a matter of time before shit hits the fan, and there's also no way that you're oblivious to that. There's absolutely no way. Cheating is everywhere, all the time. Like I mentioned, have you ever watched a movie before? I mean, come on. You're telling me you lack the basic empathy and foresight to know that you're actively hurting your partner by cheating on them. What in the weaponized incompetence is this? I'll never understand. And he ends by saying him hosting this podcast is his next step, you know, to entering the internet and like moving on with his life. And Ariel was like, you think you're interesting enough for that? Clock it! Because the answer is no, a resounding no. His questions were literally doo-doo garbage water. It was a lot of, so, I cheated. I hurt you so deeply. Thoughts on that? So how was that for you? Because for me, it was low-key chill until I got caught. But like for you, how was that for you? How are you feeling right now? I did not find him to be an engaging host, which is crazy, because if there's any interview where Ned should be able to provide any sort of valuable insight, it's this one, and he couldn't even manage that. It's also hilarious that he said that he felt pigeonholed by his image on the internet because the caricature that he was feeling pigeonholed by is being a loving husband and father. Ned, honey, you just told on yourself there. How dare they say those things? Put me in this box. That's such a mischaracterization. At least we can agree on that. If Ariel's goal was to let him make a fool of himself, mission accomplished, babe. Anywho, thanks for letting me ramble and rant about this situation. Without me even having any major ties to the Try Guys or their lore, I was still so flabbergasted about what he said on the podcast and like what his mindset was and how he was thinking about the whole act of cheating and his affair. And so I just had to talk about it with y'all. I really did. And I know that there's a lot of videos on the subject out there already, but man, I don't know if y'all have seen the Netflix documentary thing, Unknown Number, and I guess to not spoil it, it's about this person that was harassing this like young teenage girl, and they brought the person in and they were like, so why did you do that? Why did you harass this young girl and say all these horrible, disgusting, vile things to her? And the person was like, yeah, I don't know, I was going through some stuff, man, but like, you know, that's not me. I'm better now. Like, I fully understood what I did wrong, blah, blah, blah. And to me, like, it's always the same blueprint of like, yes, I really fucked up. I was going through some shit and, you know, this was my coping mechanism. And to me, that's just never ever really a satisfying response, because ultimately they can justify it within themselves. They can give any sort of excuse for why they did what they did and how they're actually, you know, not a bad person. They were just going through a hard time or they just made a bad decision. But at the end of the day, I think that what they may not comprehend is that there is a divide between a person who is capable of doing that and a person who isn't. And what does that say about you? You know what I mean? If you fall on this end and not this end. As always, please let me know your thoughts on the matter. Always curious to hear different perspectives and whatnot. Thank you all so much for being here over the course of this past month. I was kind of pumping out videos. Now I might take a little second, take a breather. I can't say see you next week, but I will see you soon. Okay, love y'all, Pookies. Talk to you later. Bye.